Max Talent Player. Chapter 51. Yunzio's Awakening. Sponsored content. Exactly when the orc archer fired its arrow, a path appeared through the regular orcs, protecting the orc archer for the slightest moment. In soccer terms, it was a very brief moment where a player could dribble straight through the defense for the goal. Here I go. Hyukjin shot forward. He didn't attempt an instantaneous approach like flash step. Whoosh! He felt an orc's iron club swing towards him. It wasn't able to hit him. The orc swung into the empty air where he had just been. From here, to the left. The current Kim Hyukjin wasn't using anything like a movement skill, or a foot technique. His movements right now were driven purely by his physical ability and reflexes. He ducked a little. Whoosh! Another iron club split the air above his head. The orcs didn't stand idly by. Quick, queek! Ever so often, there were intelligent ones who could speak the human language. Quick, eat him, queek! Orcs of this level could only utter words like, eat, hit, or kill. But they were still creatures capable of a slight degree of communication. Queek, eat! At one orc's shout, the other orcs' gazes zoomed in on Hyukjin. They didn't really have a top dog, but they were aware that chasing prey while communicating was much more advantageous than playing on their own. Yunzio, who was scrambling to follow Hyukjin, thought she was going to die. What the hell? There wasn't even time for her to scream. She urgently bent at the waist. After bending with a slightly awkward movement, she hurled herself forward. Whoosh! A metal club embedded with sharp thorns cut through the air. If that had hit me, I would have died. And even if she didn't, it would have given her a fairly big wound. And if she was injured in the midst of this orc horde, it would be a death sentence. Damn it! In Yunzio's eyes, Hyukjin was dodging like a slippery snake. He slipped through the horde with ease, finding the gaps between the orcs like a phantom. The orc's reaction speed is at least half a beat slower than him. She couldn't tell whether the orcs were slow or Hyukjin was fast, but the result was that they couldn't hit him. Their reactions were half a beat too slow, and consequently, the attacks rained down on Yunzio behind him. Using the movement art Heavenly Demonic Flying Step. Her current attainment in the Heavenly Demonic Flying Step was 1. She was merely beginning to toddle, but the Heavenly Demonic Flying Step was a movement art granted to her by the true master of the Heavenly Demonic Mountain himself. He's going left. Which meant, I need to go right here. Sponsored content. Only then would an organic movement be possible. She was beginning to see paths that she hadn't seen before using the Heavenly Demonic Flying Step. Hyukjin's eye of perception caught Yunzio's movements. She's finally started to move properly, he thought. Orcs weren't very fast monsters. He had predicted that if he dove into their ranks, they would undoubtedly attack him half a beat slower. And Yunzio immediately dodged those attacks, making it so that their paths of movement would collide and tangle. Yunzio is more than capable of confusing the orcs. While the two of them were charging in, one of the orc archers knocked an arrow. Hyukjin could read the arrow's destination. Not me. It was also not Yunzio, who was running around in the orc horde. Sunhwa, you're doing well. He could only guess that Sunhwa was having a tough time. She was taking on successive attacks from 2 orc archers, after all. Her arms might even break. But that was fine, it was better for her bones to break than to die. When Hyukjin jumped into this pack, he was also resolved to get a few broken bones somewhere. But it's easier than I expected. He could see the paths far more easily than expected. He didn't know whether it was because of eye of perception or his instincts, but the way the orcs would move, the way they would swing, how they would try to surround him, all of it was sketched out in precise clarity in his head without having to think. Did it? He had managed to approach the orc archer. Compared to regular orcs, orc archers had much lower defense. An unprotected archer was the perfect prey. I'm killing it. Using the special skill Excellent Strike. Hyukjin thrust his sword into the orc's abdomen. Squeal! A strangled scream came bursting out. The orc archer dropped the bow and bent in agony. Back of the head, pierce it! Hyukjin's attack power was insufficient to kill it in one blow. But it was alright, because to his right, Yunzio was quickly coming in from a different path. Yunzio leapt weightlessly into the air. Ha! From top to bottom, her sword went in. Splurt! The tip of the sharp sword punched through the orc archer's helm. Thuddink! The orc archer's body crumpled. Yunzio's sword went through the back of the orc archer's head and into the ground. Okay, got it. Yunzio heard a notice. Orc archer has been killed. Express acquired. 31 coins acquired. Sponsored content. At exactly the same time, Hyukjin kicked Yunseo away. Rather than saying he kicked her, he pushed her away with his foot with enough force for her to roll several times on the ground. Get it together, you wanna die after killing one? At the place where Yunseo had just been standing, an orc had swung its club. If Hyukjin hadn't kicked her out of the way, Yunseo's head would have been crushed. One more arrow. Sunhwa could only endure one more orc archer attack. I'll kill him while Sunhwa's got its aggro. The reason why he and Yunseo were able to dive into the orc horde, the reason why they could dodge and move freely through the monsters, was because the orc archers were only aiming for Sunhwa. Hyukjin was aware of that fact. We can do it. The orcs were slower and Yunseo was faster than he anticipated. He thought he would have to sacrifice his left arm or so, but it didn't look like that would be necessary. Move. Drawing in a fairly ragged breath, Hyukjin charged towards the other orc archer. Hyukjin and Yunseo hunted the remaining orc archer. Orc archer has been killed. Express acquired. 31 coins acquired. At the same time, a notice came in. The clear conditions for the first quest have been satisfied. The path to the next gateway will be opened. Destroy the clear crystal of the first gateway. Rumble. One side of the wall crumbled down, exposing a cave. The clear crystal was definitely within. Yoo-hyun had the hunch that the time for him to play his part had come. I just have to avoid fatal blows. The aggro was currently being pulled by Sunhwa, Hyukjin, and Yunseo. Slowly, without hurrying. If he moved too quickly, the aggro would bounce to him. 1 or 2 is fine. He wouldn't fight them himself. The moment he did so, the others would swarm towards him. Queek. Sponsored content. He felt one of the orcs approaching him. Soon, it'll swing. That club, he would take it on, letting it land at the place where it would hurt the least. He had to keep his right arm intact just in case. Sacrifice my left arm. Yoo-hyun clenched his teeth hard, then blocked the club with his left shoulder. Goo! Incredible pain assaulted him. It felt like his shoulder was breaking. Even so, he forged onwards. Did it. For a very short period after an orc attacked, it couldn't move. After taking one attack, Yoo-hyun was able to enter the cave with a few more steps. You have reached the crystal zone of the first gateway. The orcs no longer chased him. His decision-making had been good, and so had his luck. He saw a crystal exuding purple light in the depths of the cave. My right arm is still perfectly fine. He punched the crystal with his right fist. After a few successive attacks, the clear crystal began to crack. Thud, thud, thud. His fist slammed into the crystal. The clear crystal of the first gateway has been destroyed. Hyukjin heard that notice as well. Yoo-hyun had done his part very well, even without instruction. I knew he'd be able to do well even without being taught what to do. Hyukjin hadn't given a detailed explanation on purpose. There was no need to make it too obvious that he knew this place already. How Yoo-hyun would act had been a part of Hyukjin's calculations. A destroyed shoulder can be quickly healed with potions. Yoo-hyun would be fine. Quick, queek. The grunting orcs stiffened in place. KRRRGK KRRRGK. They began to turn into stone. From the soles of their feet to their heads, they all became stone. Petrified Orc 27 Latvian Laches. Yunseo's heart finally settled again. Phew, a little later, I would have gotten hit. Yunseo crouched a little and slipped out from under the club that had become stone. As soon as she was out, she apologized to Hyukjin. Sorry, for being too excited earlier. Hyukjin didn't respond. The thought that even the Sword Empress made mistakes like that in her beginner days was fresh to him. He had never thought the Sword Empress would ever let her guard down for one moment to celebrate killing an orc archer and nearly take a fatal blow. If you'd been hit back then, I would have been in danger, too. Do you realize that? Without Yunseo's assistance, it wouldn't have just been difficult to weave through the orc horde. It would have been close to impossible to punch through the throng and kill the remaining orc archer. Sponsored content. But wait, would it have really been impossible? Before coming in, he had thought that would be impossible. But after running around in the orc horde in the flesh, it might have been possible. The orcs were slower than he expected. It was true that their attacks were dangerous, but not if you didn't get hit. Nevertheless, he put on a harsh front. Playing wasn't a joke or a game. It was an incredibly dangerous act with your life on the line. If you're going to play like that, go home. Don't you know that one action of yours can endanger the rest of the party? Yunseo didn't retort back. Her shoulders slumped. I know, I'm sorry, I'll be more careful. While they were talking, Yoo-hyun came over and started destroying the orcs that had become statues. Blunt weapons or fist attacks were most effective against petrified monsters. Yu-hyun was doing his role well. At that sight, Yunseo clenched her fists hard. Only I did poorly here. Even the young Sunhwa carried out her task well, and the big Yu-hyun did what he was supposed to do. That went without saying for Hyukjin. I can't go on like this. It wasn't like she had some clear goal. Rather, she was crushed by the pressure she felt when she realized that everyone here could have died because of one mistake from her. She was incredibly scared when she thought of that possibility. Get your head on straight, Yunseo. The moment monsters appeared and the world changed, Yunseo made a vow. A vow to safeguard at least her family and friends from danger. To protect the people who were precious to her without fail. That was what she swore. I'll do well. A small drop created a big ripple in her heart. If her heart was a lake, then a large wave was beginning to spread out on the surface of the water. I have to become stronger. She absolutely had to become stronger. She couldn't become a burden. At least right now, at this very moment. The moment when she made a mistake. A burning desire to become stronger took root in her heart. That wish blazed brightly within her. She ended up comparing herself to Hyukjin. At least as much as Hyukjin. Strong enough that she wouldn't be a burden. Strong enough to repay her debt to him for saving her mom. She had to at least become that strong. At the same time, she heard a stream of notices. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain has perceived your burning desire. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain responds to your burning desire. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain extends a hand to you. Yunseo wasn't the only one hearing the special notices. Hyukjin, who was about to scold Yunseo further, was stunned into speechlessness. On the second underground floor of the Soul Station dungeon, yet another new notice rang in Hyukjin's ears, a notice that hadn't existed in previous raids. This sort of thing was possible? Chapter 52. Yunseo's Awakening. 2. Sponsored content. Notices came in. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain extends a hand to you. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain wishes to offer you a special proposal. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain, the Sword Empress Shin Yunseo's reliable guardian. This guardian went so far as to use the adjective, special, to offer me a proposal. What could it be? The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain offers you the heavenly demon title. If you accept the title, your advancement will automatically occur. I could only doubt my ears. Advancement due to a title? Advancement through a contract with a guardian typically happened at level 30. I wasn't level 30 yet, but the true master wanted to make me advance, using a title effect as a bypass. And it's a title with a guardian's name in it. That implied a lot. A guardian who thinks he's the best in the world and is very weak to praise and flattery. That was the evaluation the world had of the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain, though of course no one dared to say that outright. But seeing as a guardian like that wants to bestow a title with his name in it using an expedient, it must be an incredible title. It could even be a title that the former Sword Empress got. Since it was a title given in the beginner period, it was definitely capable of growth. The higher one's attainment, the stronger the title's effects would become. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain says frankly that heavenly demons have a I am my own lord throughout heaven and earth temperament. Simply put, he was bragging that the heavenly demon title was a really amazing title. I think this is probably a special title granted to only one person. Then what would happen to the Sword Empress? Do I take it, or not? It might be an unfortunate development for Yunseo, but it could also be a truly huge opportunity for me. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain was trying to persuade me to advance, shouting, I am my own lord throughout heaven and earth, and offering me a title bearing his name. Of course it was a good thing for me. Since he even ignored the level 30 advancement rule and went this far, he's certainly a powerful guardian. There was no doubt about that. It was such a big opportunity for me that I had to seriously contemplate whether I should accept it or not. Sponsored content. No. I couldn't accept it. The Sword Empress Shin Yunseo. The Sword Empress I knew was truly strong. She was said to be the strongest in 1 vs 1 PvP. But even so, her limitations were clear. Only by gathering all 8 heroes of Korea were they able to confront the Demon King and his army. If the Demon King was the object of comparison, then the class the Sword Empress had possessed definitely had its limitations. Since I've somehow returned to the past, I had to become someone greater than the Sword Empress. I was given this chance, so I decided to do my utmost. I didn't want to limit myself to being a Sword Emperor, Or, the strongest in 1 versus 1 PvP. I made my decision. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain. Wasn't that petty of a guardian. Meaning, even if I rejected his active offer of sponsorship, he wouldn't harangue me afterwards. I refuse. Notices came in instantly. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain is greatly disappointed. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain feels great regret. Thankfully, his reaction stopped at disappointment. Petty guardians sometimes went and declared a player as their enemy. When they did so, there was probably an accompanying notice saying that the guardian was greatly enraged. Yuncio, didn't you also get a notice? I said intentionally. Yeah, I did. You got one too? She was really naive. A seasoned player would have hidden such an occurrence from me. What kind of contract a guardian had offered her, what kind of title or abilities they were playing with, all of that was a kind of strategic asset. She's so naive. The Sword Empress in her beginner days was extremely naive. Even without psychological warfare or trades, she blathered a stream of information on her own initiative. It said he responds to my burning desire. Burning desire? Yeah, After a moment of silence, she continued. Want to get stronger. So she was saying she had a burning desire to get stronger. I understood that desire, because even I wanted to get stronger, right this moment. Later on, people judged burning desire to become stronger in itself as a part of one's talent. Of course the future Sword Empress would want to become stronger. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain had reacted to that desire. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain offered me an advancement. I thought he would. Sponsored content. Really? You predicted this? How did you know? Did you also get a notice? Of course I hadn't predicted it. This girl was just coming to her own conclusions. Everything she said were things that others wouldn't have ever known if she hadn't said them herself. So she definitely got an advancement notice. The heavenly demon had offered advancement to 2 people simultaneously, and before level 30. He certainly seemed powerful. He offered me the heavenly demon title, but there was a high chance that it was a unique title, which meant that it was highly likely the true master offered Yuncio a title of a lower grade. That won't do. Yuncio was a teammate I would be working with hand in hand. She might be inexperienced and unreliable right now, but there was a big chance she would become one of the heroes representing Korea. How can I manipulate the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain? I couldn't lie. Spouting obvious lies to guardians was a suicidal act. I have to make him give her the heavenly demon title. After thinking, I said, he gave me very good advancement conditions, too. But I rejected it. Why? Is this actually not a good thing? Should I not agree to this? Thankfully, it didn't look like she chose yes yet. I thought it was really good. It's not? Tell me. I didn't know what exactly she was offered, but it couldn't be as good as Heavenly Demon. Of course it's really good. Then why didn't you accept? Because I've got a relatively clear idea of what my playstyle is. My playstyle was currently something close to an all-rounder player. I could go into most classes. But out of all those classes, the one that could fully bring out all of my strength right now was a class similar to a sovereign. Using my knowledge and intuition to make party playing go smoothly. Really? Yunzio's expression was one of slight doubt. It was understandable, since I had gone for the orc archer with more efficient movements than her. Just now, without you, Sunhwa, or Yuhyun, I wouldn't have been able to clear this place. It wasn't a lie. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain was probably listening seriously to my words as well. In other words, I have an aptitude for determining the traits and uses of each player and putting each player in the right place. So you're saying you're more suited to be a leader, yeah? Yuncio nodded in understanding. Yeah, I did think that while seeing you play. You move like someone who knows all the strats. There's no way that could be true, right? Except there was. I knew all the strategies. But even if I didn't, it almost felt like I knew them instinctively. Somehow, it felt like I had that kind of talent. Doing this here, and that there, that intuition came to me automatically, though I didn't know if it was because of my talent or because of eye of perception. Sponsored content. Since eye of perception is an innate ability, can you call it talent? Well, whatever. You can just think of it as a special talent of mine. The ability to determine a person's abilities and direct them appropriately. I think I get what you're saying. I definitely feel like the path is clear when I move according to your words. I probably have a better understanding of you than you yourself. It wasn't a lie. After all, this girl had no idea that she had the qualities to become the future Sword Empress. You do? At least in swordsmanship, your dormant potential is way higher than mine. Really? You think so? I didn't know whether that was true or not, but it was hardly a blatant lie. It also sounded quite truthful. I trust my eyes. I see. You listening, true master? This conversation is actually not between me and Yunseo, but me and you. Are you really going to leave such a big treasure? Yeah, it's hard to describe it in detail. It's something that only the special eyes I have can pick up on. If I hadn't been observing you right here in person, I wouldn't have been able to see your dormant potential. Basically, I was saying, you guardians watching from above probably can't see this girl's true value. You were observing me that closely? Why was her face getting all red for no good reason? Yeah, because your dormant potential is huge. I didn't know you thought so highly of me. State, embarrassed, shy, expectant. Wait a sec, what was she expecting here? Why was expectant in her state? I really couldn't figure out what Yunseo was thinking. Was I unable to understand the 20-year-old Yunseo because I was a 30-year-old bachelor on the inside? You really mean it? Yeah, I think that the things I can do well and the things you can do well are different. Yunseo seemed a little happier than before. The carrot had to taste all the better after getting the stick. That's why I thought that the honorable title the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain was offering me would suit you better. An honorable title. Hey, heavenly demon? I really want that title too, dearest true master. But sigh, there's no helping it. It'll suit this girl better, you know? You'll want to give it to her, you know? She'll be better than me, you know? She's a real genius. That's why I refused, because I judged that you could make that honorable title shine more than me. As I expected, the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain was paying close attention to my words. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain is pleased by your words. Sponsored content. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain praises your insight. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain praises you. I decided to give a little more lip service. If you were to become the exclusive holder of the title that I almost got, I'm sure you could make that title shine brighter than anyone. It's my belief that you could even become the most famous player in the world. Yunzeo's eyes grew wide. Really? Of course, because a great guardian like the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain offered an advancement through a title in person. True master, you're listening, right? And all the other guardians, you're listening, yeah? Can't you see that the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain just used a trick to try and recruit us? You guys should step it up. The other guardians will definitely take action now. That was why I intentionally uttered advancement through a title. With this, he'll have no choice but to give Yunseo the heavenly demon title. Since it was already exposed that he had played a cowardly trick, if he didn't settle this properly, guardians like the Lady of the Scales, who valued justice and impartiality, would strongly complain. I saved his face, justified my reason for refusing, told him she has a huge amount of dormant potential, and plus, his back is to the wall. In the end, the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain would grant Yunseo the heavenly demon title. Sure enough. Hyukjin, I've advanced. Just in case this silly girl blathered more personal information, I blocked her mouth with my hand. There's no need to give every little detail about your personal information. Even to me or your party members. Got it? If you understand, I'm taking my hand off, alright? Yunseo nodded, and her state was updated. State, shy, expectant, aflutter. It became even more incomprehensible. Where in the world was she getting this, aflutter, feeling from? The valid time of the first gateway has run out. You will be automatically sent to the second gateway. When we were sent to the second gateway, I found myself in a completely different, second gateway, than the one I remembered. Goddammit. I had a feeling I knew what this was. Why is this happening now? Chapter 53, Great Orc Warrior. Sponsored content. Entering the second gateway, Village of the Orc Warrior. That much was fine, but the second gateway scenario, Village of the Orc Warrior, has been partially altered. The scenario was suddenly altered, and I knew why. This is conclusive proof that the true master gave Yunseo the heavenly demon title. Nothing in life was 100% good. He had forcefully given Yunseo something so good that it changed the contents of the gateway. It was only natural that there would be a counter-reaction. The true master didn't break the rules. When a guardian actively interfered with a player's playing in such a manner, something would happen to counterbalance it. The true master likely knew that as well. What changed, and how? Whatever it was definitely not a good thing for us. The perk of the second gateway, Orc Warrior becomes stone when the crystal is destroyed, has been removed. As long as we destroyed the crystal, the orc warrior, that was this gateway's boss monster, would turn into stone. But now, that would no longer happen. This alone dramatically increased the difficulty. And it didn't end there. The grade increase restriction of the orc warrior in the second gateway scenario has been removed. You are given the second gateway scenario quest, Kill the Orc Warrior. The Orc Warrior was a monster that would grow stronger the longer you fought it. Since we were in a beginner grade area, its growth was limited to Advanced Orc Warrior. If the grade increase restriction has been removed, that means it can become an Orc Warrior of a higher grade. I mentally sifted through a lot of information. With the conditions of this place, it can't evolve all the way into a high orc. To begin with, high orcs and regular orcs were like apples and oranges. They were on completely different levels. If a high orc showed up here, we would all be annihilated, 100%, no question about it. If I connect the second gateway's perk in the current situation, then it was possible to deduce a rough estimate of how strong the orc warrior could become. It'll evolve to a great orc warrior. Starting from the great orc warrior, there was a wide variation in the levels of individual monsters of the same species, but they were typically around level 37. The higher level ones were even level 40. Such an opponent was, of course, impossible for us to face with our current strength. Damn it. Sponsored content. The scenario hadn't started in full force yet. We were currently in the safe zone, but even this safe zone would soon disappear. What do we do? I had to think and figure out a strategy to clear this place. Is there nothing we can do? Right at this moment, it seemed like there was no way forward. We were in the second gateway, called the Village of the Orc Warrior. It was a grassland field, and I could see tents built in a messy cluster in the distance. It was more likely that the orcs had picked them up and were using tents that someone had made rather than making the tents themselves. Metal stakes of various lengths were scattered on the ground around us. The second gateway scenario quest, Kill the Orc Warrior, has begun. If you are unable to destroy the 3 crystals within the set time, orc archers will spawn. Remaining time 10 o'clock. This was the original content of the second gateway. I already knew where all of the crystals were. If we can't break 3 crystals within 10 minutes, 3 orc archers will spawn. I bent to pick up a few stakes. A key item. These stakes looked unrelated, but they were definitely items you could acquire, important items. Yuncio asked, Boss, what do we do? Should we start by splitting up and looking for the crystals? I nodded. You saw the way the orcs moved earlier, right? Yeah, I think I can dodge them. Some way or another. I had to think hard for a moment. I already knew where the crystals were. The orcs were still in their tents and hadn't shown themselves yet, but normal orcs would soon swarm. If there's an orc horde with orc archers in it, and an orc warrior shows up on top of that, clearing this will be impossible. We absolutely needed to block the appearance of orc archers, even if we took some damage to achieve it. I had to calculate my actions well. It would be troublesome if it looked like I obviously knew where the crystals were on the stream. In that case, I would use the most basic method, looking for them one by one. You see that tent in the distance with the flag flying high? We'll search with that point as the center. Got it. Start at the very right from that point and look for the crystals while moving towards the center. And don't fight the orcs? Yeah, avoid contact as much as possible. The crystals come first and foremost. Righto. Sponsored content. Yuncio set off first. A hazy black energy was wisping off her legs, as if she were using a special movement technique. It's probably the heavenly demonic flying step. There was a high chance it was the first stage of the heavenly demonic flying step. Sunhwa and Yuhyun, you two take the other side. Move from the very left towards the middle together. They immediately understood. Yuhyun had slightly lower agility and speed. That meant he couldn't swiftly weave through the enemies like Yuncio. They would have to take on a few attacks, which Sunhwa would block. Okay. Understood, Hyungnim. With this method, we would be able to destroy 2 crystals within 10 minutes, no problem. I have to break the last one, but that last crystal was inside the central tent. The problem was that the orc warrior was surely sleeping within that tent. If I go inside, it'll probably start attacking. Originally, I was planning on having Yuncio pull the aggro while I went in to destroy the crystal, and that would be a wrap. Because as long as we destroy the crystal, the orc warrior would turn into stone. But now, that benefit was gone. We were now in a situation where we had to kill the orc warrior anyway. I was still unsure, could we really kill it? If we can't, then I just have to make it happen. My head couldn't come up with a method to kill it, But when I actually went into the central tent and had a look for myself, I had a flash of inspiration. We can do it. I heard 2 notices. 1 crystal has been destroyed. Destroy the crystals. 1/3 complete. Must be Yunseo. Yunseo would join me soon. Yuhyun and Sunhwa would take a little longer. Yunseo came running over with a slightly brighter expression. I destroyed a crystal. The orcs were chasing me, but looks like they gave up in the end. Orcs were slow. They couldn't keep up with Yunseo. As long as the aggro was weak, they would stop chasing her once she got a certain distance away from them. Well done. Did I really do good? Yeah. Sponsored content. I examined the inside of the tent very carefully, finding a purple crystal and a snoring orc warrior. There were also regular orcs napping around the orc warrior. I explained the method I came up with to Yunseo. Listen up. A cloud of dust was being kicked up. An orc horde came running this way. Quick, quick. Unlike Yunseo, who had properly shaken off the orcs, Yuhyun and Sunhwa had a good 10 or so orcs hot on their tails. Yunseo wasn't surprised. That was because she had already heard this would happen from Hyukjin. Those 2 will definitely pull orcs this way. They're not as fast as you, after all. Hyukjin shouted. Yuhyun, Sunhwa. Just get in the orc horde and keep their aggro on you. To make it easy for each party member to understand, I instructed them separately. In the meantime, Yunseo, you attack them one by one. Keep the aggro on Sunhwa. Yuhyun and Sunhwa understood exactly what they had to do. I think we have to keep moving together, Mr. Okay. Otherwise, both of them would die. They had to work together. That was the only way they could survive while effectively stirring up the orc horde. As they did so, Yunseo started attacking them one by one. Her movements were indeed swift and precise. Splurt. Yunseo's sword pierced an orc's throat, severing what would be the carotid artery for a human. Blood gushed out of the orc's neck. I did it. Her goal was not this orc's death. She carried out Hyukjin's orders to the letter. When you attack the orcs, killing them isn't the goal. Make them bleed. Next. A wound of this level was more than enough. Using the skill Swift Strike. With a strike 1.2x faster than a regular attack, Yunseo's sword pierced another orc's neck, causing another stream of blood to fountain out. Yunseo was covered in the spray as well. As she stood there, covered in dark red blood, she almost looked like a yaksha from hell. Next. 3, 4, 5 orcs. She aimed for the same spot every time, and successfully struck the same spot every time. Ha, ha. Little by little, her breath became labored. Even though she wasn't completely killing them and was only wounding them, fighting a whopping 5 orcs at once was no easy feat. Sunhwa jumped in front of her. Sponsored content. Unnie, watch out. Using the skill Platinum Shield. Clang. With a loud clang, Sunhwa heard a CRA crack sound from within her body. Uck. Her left arm hung limply. Her body was unable to handle the impact, and her shoulder was in pieces. While that was going on outside, Hyukjin approached the crystal. Getting to it immediately will be tough. The chaos outside was rousing the sleeping orcs. The orc warrior opened its eyes as well. I can't make a straight line to the crystal. He couldn't see a route there. From now on, Hyukjin would have to fight the orcs and orc warrior simultaneously, with no hope of support or help. I have to kill them. Even if he broke the crystal, they would remain alive. Starting with this guy. He lowered his body a little and approached one orc with a speed that matched Yunseo's while she was using heavenly demonic flying step. Then, his sharp blade aimed for the orc's throat with a precision that rivaled Yunseo's. Queek. Blood surged out of the orc's neck as it screamed. Hyukjin jumped back immediately after leaving the big wound. He couldn't brute force it and charge straight in. A single mistake could be the difference between life and death. If he were to take a blow from the orc warrior's huge club right now, would I even be able to survive one hit? Even that was uncertain. If he was unlucky and was injured, he would be surrounded by the orcs in seconds. He could easily become the hunted instead of the hunter. Hyukjin filled his lungs and yelled, "Come in!" Yunseo, Yuhyun, and Sunhwa, who had been fighting the orcs near the tent, immediately ran inside. The injured orcs thumped and clunked in after them. In mere moments, the orc warrior's tent was thrown into total chaos. Quick, quick. Quick, quick, quick. It wasn't that wide of a space, and nearly 10 orcs crammed themselves in. The orcs' characteristic rotten stench and metallic reek of blood filled the space. In just moments, the inside of the tent was hot with fervor. And then, something shocking began to happen. Yunseo's jaw dropped. Hyukjin's words were true. Chapter 54. Great Orc Warrior 2. Sponsored content. The Orc Warrior stood up, its nostrils flaring. Its body was nearly twice the size of regular orcs. Quick! It smelled like something delicious, the smell of blood. Queek! The Orc Warrior's eyes turned red. It didn't see that the ones bleeding were fellow orcs and became completely intoxicated by the smell of blood. Hyukjin confirmed that the Orc Warrior's eyes had changed. It worked. The Orc Warrior was weak to the smell of blood. With this much, it would instantly go completely bonkers. Now, it would start hunting its allies like a train running off its tracks. Crunch! The Orc Warrior ripped off an orc's arm and chomped it down whole, crunching down on bone. Squeal! Its hapless victim squealed. The Orc Warrior grabbed it at the waist and began to consume it, chomping and munching from the head down. Completely intoxicated by the smell of blood, the Orc Warrior became even more fevered. Delicious things. Delicious things. Delicious things. Only one thought, prey, dominated the Orc Warrior's instincts. The Orc Warrior roared, dark red blood flying out of its mouth. The orcs began to flee in terror. Queek! A notice came in at the same time. The Orc Warrior's innate ability, Orc Fear, has been triggered. Hyukjin grinned. There it is, Orc Fear. Actually, this wasn't an Orc Warrior exclusive innate ability. It was a technique most boss monsters had. Normally, it's an ability that freezes players or makes them unable to flee. But not right now. Right now, it's to prevent the escape of its delicious prey, the orcs. Sponsored content. This Orc Fear wasn't aimed at them, the players, but at the fleeing orcs. As a result, Hyukjin and the others weren't greatly affected. And, the Orc Warrior isn't a super high-level boss monster. He didn't know for sure, but he believed it was very unlikely that the Orc Warrior would use its fear move again. It probably had an extremely long cooldown. With the really high-ranked monsters, they would fire fear at random and make things difficult for players. But not the Orc Warrior. The cooldown being extremely long basically means that its innate ability has been used up. In that case, it would be much easier to face from now on. Squeal! The orcs became sacrifices to the Orc Warrior. The great beast chomped down orcs as soon as it could grab them, as if the word satiety did not exist in its book. The Orc Warrior has evolved into an advanced Orc Warrior. Breathing hard, Yunseo asked Hyukjin, can we really leave it be? Even though its body got bigger? It was already a hulking lump, but it became even bigger. Hyunnim, the definition of its muscles has become crazy high. I think it's gotten a lot stronger. Hyukjin nodded. Fighting one advanced Orc Warrior is better than fighting the Orc Warrior and its horde of orcs. At least for us. The choice he had made was to fight one general rather than hundreds of soldiers. That was Hyukjin's choice, to fight one strong being rather than a multitude of weak ones. This method is our path to survival. He also knew its limits. It couldn't grow all the way to a high orc anyway. If it stopped here, that would be great, but even if it grew a little more, it would stop at a great Orc Warrior. It's going to be dangerous anyway, so it'd be fine to evolve into a great Orc Warrior, at least. The perceived difficulty would be similar. Both the advanced and great Orc Warrior were monsters that he and his party members couldn't defeat at their current level without knowing the strategy, anyway. Both of them were strong. The perceived difficulty would be similar, but the quality of the items they dropped would be completely different. Since things had come to this, Hyukjin thought it would be good if it evolved into a great Orc Warrior. Crunch! The now advanced Orc Warrior was in a frenzy to murder and consume its allies. It ate yet another orc, bones and all. It didn't show the slightest interest in the players, Hyukjin and his party members. That was because the delicious scent, the smell of blood, was exceedingly weak on them. Squeal! Inside the tent, the last orc disappeared inside the advanced Orc Warrior's belly. The advanced Orc Warrior has evolved into a great Orc Warrior. It finally seemed full. Only then did the great Orc Warrior begin to have an interest in the players. A flash quest, Kill the Great Orc Warrior, has been triggered. Kill the Great Orc Warrior. Sponsored content. Kill the Great Orc Warrior. You cannot kill the Great Orc Warrior with your current abilities alone. However, the courageous Lion King will watch over your courage and guts. Quest reward. Special ability, Metal. It wasn't a quest given to just Hyukjin. Yuhyun, Yunseo, and Sunhwa got it as well. Metal. Metal. A person's grit and resilience in dealing with difficulties, no matter what they were. This came out here? There were a great number of ways you could acquire this ability. Hyukjin had also written up a plan to acquire metal, because it was one of the key abilities for rankers. If you had metal, your resistance to mental attacks became much higher, and it would negate a good portion of boss monster fears. I have to do it. It was unexpected, but he was happy about it. How unusual that the damned courage lover is being helpful for once. In any case, he could earn metal with this. As long as I can kill that monster, that is. Raids were always one or the other. It came down to whether the foe died, or you did. Whether the monster died, or the player did. It would only end with one or the other. It's big. It was about 3 meters tall, so enormous that it made even the giant Yuhyun look small. Yuhyun and Yunseo stood on either side of Hyukjin, and Sunhwa stood right in front of him. Boss, Hyukjin, this is gonna be fine, right? Hyukjin didn't know. We have to hope that our plan worked. If it didn't, then they would die here. There was no other way. In this scenario, which had changed because of the true master of the heavenly demonic mountain, there was no other way for them to survive. Yunseo regripped her sword. A bead of sweat ran down her forehead, traveling over her cheeks and down her nape. She stared at the great orc warrior with a piercing intensity. It wasn't making any real movements yet. This was the calm before the storm, the moment before two forces collided. Thump. Thump. Her heart trembled. Yunseo kept her nerves stretched taut. At least. The good thing was that the current situation was perfectly in line with what Hyukjin had schemed. Hyukjin created this situation. Sponsored content. This was definitely the desired outcome of Hyukjin's tactic. Hyukjin said, I'm going in. Oppa, won't it be better for me to go in? I'm sturdier. Hyukjin chuckled. Being sturdy means nothing. One hit, and it'll be over, anyway. The level indication shows up as question marks to me. The Great Orc Warrior's level was around 37. Sunhwa as she was now would not be able to block a single hit from such a monster. So it's better for me to go, since I have a slight chance of being able to dodge. Hyukjin moved forward. Did it really work? Seeing as the Great Orc Warrior hadn't moved this whole time, it did look like their plan worked, somewhat. It ate a lot in a hurry, so its stomach must be very bloated. And most likely, the mutant wolf's fang should have taken effect. The mutant wolf's fang was an item Hyukjin had steadily collected ever since the tutorial. It was also essentially the first item he acquired in the tutorial field. Mutant wolf's fang. The fang of the poisonous mutant wolf. It possesses a fatal, paralyzation poison. The orc warrior had swallowed the orc's whole. Hyukjin knew that it would do so in advance and had embedded mutant wolf's fangs all over on the orcs' bodies. The reason why they left the orcs alive, why they pulled them all the way into the tent, and why they made the orc warrior eat the orcs was all for this outcome. Hyunnim, will that really have an effect? A few wouldn't have made any difference. He drew even closer to the great orc warrior. But this guy swallowed at least 70 fangs. He didn't expect the fangs to be able to completely paralyze the monster. Mutant wolf's fangs were unable to completely paralyze a great orc warrior, of all things. But they could greatly slow down the monster's movements. Hyukjin slightly lowered his center of gravity. The great orc warrior saw a player coming near it. For some reason, its body felt sluggish, but it was fine. That puny human was nothing. One bite, and it would be over. The great orc warrior did not feel much danger. Hyukjin used the special skill, Flash Step, by title switching. The monster ahead would be unable to react to his speed. Sponsored content. Whoosh! The great orc warrior swung its massive, 1-meter large club. It's faster than I thought. The great orc warrior reacted a little to Flash Step. It was definitely a high-level monster. But this much, I can manage. It was only a little faster than he expected, not something he couldn't handle. Hyukjin whipped around to the back of the great orc warrior using Flash Step. Yunseo. Giving a signal to Yunseo, Hyukjin swung his sword at the Achilles tendon of the great orc warrior. The monster raised its left foot, as if it had eyes on the back of its head. Then, it whirled rapidly around. Despite suffering from the effects of paralyzation poison, it evaded Hyukjin's attack very easily. In the meantime, Yunseo used Heavenly Demonic Flying Step to get close. That guy is aiming for Hyukjin. Its back was unguarded. My goal is the ribs. She couldn't deal a fatal blow in one hit. They had to pare down the monster's health little by little. Here I go. But just then, the great orc warrior swung down its arm. Clang! Its arm blocked Yunseo's sword. Even though it wasn't wearing armor, the sound was like steel meeting steel. How can its body be so sturdy? That meant at Yunzio's current level and attack power, she was unable to penetrate the monster's skin, especially the tough skin of its arm. Hyukjin saw it all. The look in its eyes has changed. Those were not the eyes of prey being hunted. The beast in front was full of confidence. The great orc warrior was convinced that it was the predator here. Even though its body didn't move as it wanted, it could catch and swallow these measly humans no problem. Those were the thoughts Hyukjin saw in its eyes. The eyes of a predator. He had been waiting for this very moment. They would only have one chance. In order to come this far, he had designed and painted the situation stroke by stroke. Now, the opportunity had come. Hyukjin moved, determined to make a miracle happen. Chapter 55. Great Orc Warrior, 3. Sponsored content. The Great Orc Warrior was convinced it was the predator here. It filled its lungs, preparing to let out a bellow full of confidence. Guroaar. It roared, opening its jaws wide. These tiny humans. Even if they came in a swarm, it would not fear them in the least. It wondered how delicious human meat was, if it could become even stronger by eating humans. Its thoughts were dominated by such instincts. But then... Splurt. Hyukjin's sword pierced through the great orc warrior's mouth. Squeaal. The moment it roared, that was the moment Hyukjin had been aiming for. The great orc warrior's skin was tough. Even its eyes were sturdy. The mouth was very nearly the sole vulnerable spot of such a sturdy monster. Now, the inside of the mouth. It was a fleeting moment, but Hyukjin didn't let it slip through his fingers. Squeaal. With a sword lodged in its mouth, the great orc warrior screamed as it crouched. Hyukjin's attack didn't end there. I have to see it through. The great orc warrior's right fist came flying at him, but Hyukjin dodged it with ease. The force behind the punch was great enough to kill him instantly, but only if it hit him. Hyukjin took out the item he'd picked up earlier. He drove the steel spike upright at a 90-degree angle in the beast's mouth. Now, it won't be able to close its mouth. He had utilized the strategy to the utmost, not missing the tiny opening he was given. He took a step back. Yuhyun. Yuhyun swiftly ran over. The great orc warrior had fallen to its knees. It was clawing desperately at its face, but the pain was too great for it to grab the sword lodged deep inside. It flailed in pain, unable to do anything. Aim for the temples. The great orc warrior on its knees was at a height where Yuhyun's fists could easily reach its head. Yes, Hyungnim. Yuhyun approached quickly. He used his left foot as a central axis and pivoted his hips. A right fist loaded with all the force of Yuhyun's weight slammed into the great orc warrior's temple. Bam! A resounding boom burst out. Yuhyun's fist landed precisely on the great orc warrior's temple. Staying in place, Yuhyun threw his left fist with his weight behind it. A left hook after a right hook. Yuhyun's sturdy legs allowed him to perfectly keep his balance. The momentarily incapacitated great orc warrior was no different from a sandbag to him. The great orc warrior's upper body swayed. Hyungnim, can I attack its jaw? As long as you don't dislodge the stake. Sponsored content. Understood. Yuhyun grabbed the great orc warrior's head with both hands and thrust his knee into its chin. Using the skill beginner knee kick. The knee kick planted perpendicular to the ground didn't dislodge the stake. Rather, it pushed the stake further into the monster's gums, fixing it more firmly in place. It went through. Normally, the great orc warrior would counterattack or block, but not right now. First of all, it was under the paralyzing poison of mutant wolf's fang, and secondly, it had suffered an attack to a vulnerable part of its body, the mouth. The current great orc warrior was not the usual great orc warrior. It was far weaker. Yunzio came in as well. Using the skill single-hit finisher. Yunzio had also determined that the great orc warrior's weakness was the inside of its mouth. She aimed at a point directly inside the mouth, and her sword pierced its mark. After around 5 minutes, the great orc warrior finally collapsed limply to the ground. Splurt. Hyukjin buried his sword into the back of the great orc warrior's head. Great orc warrior has been killed. Express acquired. 50 coins acquired. He was able to get an item from the great orc warrior's body. Great orc warrior's molar. A long molar of the great orc warrior. It is imbued with the great orc warrior's strength. If processed in a special way and ingested, you will be able to acquire a special power. No other items were dropped. The second gateway scenario quest, Kill the Orc Warrior, has been cleared. Distributing the Kill the Orc Warrior quest clear rewards. Great Orc Warrior's iron armor has been acquired. Great Orc Warrior's leather shoes has been acquired. Hyukjin craned his ears at the notices. Sponsored content. The Great Orc Warrior set is pretty valuable, even in the middle period. He was given iron armor and 1 pair of leather shoes. Currently, considering it was the beginner period, where most players hadn't even advanced properly yet, he had gotten extremely good items. It should be really helpful in the level 30 period. But it didn't end there. The special ability, Metal, has been acquired. The rewards for killing the Great Orc Warrior, a nearly impossible, highly difficult foe to defeat if not for Hyukjin's quick thinking, were absolutely not small. Metal. Metal is the aura of a ruler and the higher form of pressure. It induces instinctive fear and awe in those who are of a lower level than the user. Unlike an innate ability, which was a dormant power within a player, a special ability was a new power granted to a player by an external force. Among those special abilities, Hyukjin acquired Metal. So this is the higher form of pressure. Pressure was the ability the president of Sungshin, Song Kyung, had used. Now, Hyukjin had the higher version of it, Metal. But just then, he heard another notice. The herdsman of Las Vegas has begun to watch you. For a moment, I could only doubt my ears. The herdsman of Las Vegas? Even among guardians, he was an extremely famous one. He was the guardian of Michelle, one of America's top rankers. Her nickname was Pyramid, or more precisely, Gold Pyramid. Michelle's guardian is watching me? The herdsman of Las Vegas was a guardian who placed a great deal of importance on effective team plays and teamwork. Michelle was a player optimized for that. The queen at the top of countless sovereign class players. Each and every one of the players under Michelle's banner, the so-called Michelle division, were national powerhouses of the highest level. The sovereign they followed was Michelle, and the guardian Michelle made a contract with was the herdsman of Las Vegas. I thought he would be in the US server? He was watching the Korean server instead of the US one? This was certainly unprecedented. The only person who successfully contracted with the herdsman of Las Vegas was Michelle. A guardian who had given almost exclusive support to Michelle and based his operations in the US server suddenly started to watch me. However, it didn't end at simply watching. The herdsman of Las Vegas has sent you Great Orc Warrior's leather pants as a sponsorship. He kicked things off with a very generous sponsorship. With that, I was able to acquire the Great Orc Warrior's armor, shoes, and pants. Did anyone else get a notice from a guardian called the herdsman of Las Vegas? I asked. Everyone shook their heads. The herdsman of Las Vegas was only interested in me. Sponsored content. The clear condition has been fulfilled as a result of clearing the scenario quest. Hunt the remaining orcs. Originally, the second gateway in the second underground floor of the Soul Station dungeon would be finished once you destroyed the 3 crystals and smashed the petrified orcs. But now, we had to kill all the living orcs. The difficulty itself was far higher. However, they weren't orc warriors, but regular orcs, and terrified ones, at that. It wasn't difficult to hunt them down. Orc has been killed. Express acquired. Level increased. Current level, 29. We went around the dungeon for about 1 hour. Squeal. And then, we succeeded in killing the last orc. You have cleared the Soul Station dungeon second underground floor. 300 coins acquired. Dungeon title, Conqueror of the Soul Station dungeon, acquired. Leaving the dungeon in 30 seconds. Dungeon titles were different from regular titles. Dungeon titles were special titles that only applied within the dungeon where it was acquired. Normally, they weren't that useful. Having it is still better than nothing, though. Sunhwa smiled wide. We cleared it. Her brightly smiling face looked really cute. I wondered if this is how it would feel if I had a daughter later. Everyone relished the joy of the clear. Yunseo went into a big stretch. I'll need to sleep for about 3 days when we get out. While she was stretching, something caught my eye. Huh? Over there, near the tent of the Great Orc Warrior, I saw a door in the air. What's that door? Yunseo turned. I don't see anything? Leaving the dungeon in 20 seconds. Sponsored content. Sunhwa also tilted her head. What, is there something there? Yuhyun was the same. There's nothing there, Hyungnim. Leaving the dungeon in 13 seconds. I was sure of it. Only I could see that door. I had never heard of any kind of door within this hidden piece. The Soul Station dungeon second underground floor. Not even in the exploration logs of the great explorer, Jackson. Leaving the dungeon in 9 seconds. A door only I could see. What did it mean? I had never experienced a phenomenon like this in the flesh. In addition, the second floor of the D-Tower parking lot is being established as an extra safe zone. During the tutorial, I had heard a special notice that no one else had heard. An unfair notice, determined by talent. That was what I was seeing right now. It's because of that notice that I attempted the D-Tower second floor. It was because I heard that extra safe zone notice that I was able to come back alive from the tutorial. A door visible only to me. I made a decision. There's a door only I can see. I think it's a special hidden piece, I said quickly. Leaving the dungeon in 6 seconds. So you guys go out first. I'll come out after clearing it. The clock kept ticking down. There was no time to spare. Leaving the dungeon in 3 seconds. I immediately used Flash Step with title switching and reached the door instantaneously. Voices came from behind me. Hey, boss, what is it? What's going on? Hyungnim. Oppa. I wasn't able to explain anymore. Leaving the dungeon in 1 second. My hand touched the door. You have discovered a special hidden piece, Forest of Unknowns. Entering the Forest of Unknowns. Max Talent Player. Chapter 56, The Herdsman of Las Vegas. Sponsored content. Senya's wings trembled. She was maintaining an expressionless face, but inside, she was greatly shocked. Are you telling me there was a special hidden piece here? That was something even she, an intermediate administrator, didn't know about. She had never thought that such a hidden piece would exist in what was merely the beginner period, not even a higher level period. A special hidden piece. It was the sort of thing the Guardians, as addicted to spectating as they were, went crazy over. The messages of Guardians reacting and entering her channel hit her almost like a deluge. Anonymous Guardians are entering channel number 19,207 in great numbers. The Herdsman of Las Vegas has sent a subscription contract request to channel number 19,207. The True Master of the Heavenly Demonic Mountain has sent the Intermediate Administrator a 200 coin sponsorship. The Lady of the Scales has sent the Intermediate Administrator a 120 coin sponsorship. The stream of notices continued without end. A whopping, special hidden piece that no one had anticipated in the beginner period was discovered. And that was being streamed exclusively by Senya. The Guardians were not stingy with their sponsorships to such a commendable Intermediate Administrator. Of the Guardians who had just come in and didn't know yet what was going on, the anonymous Guardians shot out a barrage of questions. What in the world is this? Isn't this the beginner period? A special hidden piece actually existed? Could it be a special area made by some respected Guardian? Can someone explain this to me, please? The true name Guardians who, unlike such rabble, could be called the real Guardians, watched the situation in silence. They might be staying quiet, but it was a definite fact that they, too, were on the edge of their seats. Senya was bewildered. This is the strength of good quality content. Actually, she knew. She knew she wasn't good at talking, that she couldn't make things fun like the other intermediate administrators, and that she couldn't accommodate the Guardians' tastes very well. The only advantage she had was her appearance, which could contend for the top ranks even among intermediate administrators in beauty. But beauty alone isn't enough for me to survive. That was something Senya knew keenly, as well. But now, there was already a Guardian wanting to subscribe, and countless Guardians were showering her with coins. There were also many Guardians who didn't go into the channels of other intermediate administrators and stayed exclusively in hers, channel number 19,207. Standing in front of the door going into the Forest of Unknowns, Senya stared at Kim Hyukjin. His movements held no trace of hesitation or delay. To Hyukjin, it was definitely uncharted territory, but he didn't look fearful in the least. Player Kim Hyukjin. Just like Hyukjin had guaranteed, he certainly proved his worth as quality content. If not for him, Senya would have probably not even made it this far. The Courageous Lion King has sent a subscription contract request to channel number 19,207. A great number of anonymous Guardians have become excited. Sponsored content. A great number of anonymous Guardians are unable to take their eyes off player Kim Hyukjin. She looked at Hyukjin once again. She, like the Guardians, was unable to take her eyes off him. Please don't die. Senya was suddenly taken aback, greatly startled by her own emotions. No, I was just mistaken for a moment. She unconsciously shook her head, and 3 times at that. This emotion isn't me worrying about player Kim Hyukjin. She, Senya, did not stoop to the likes of worrying. Such an emotion was worthless. She had no emotions. She was convinced of that. So the thought that had just run through her mind was absolutely not worry. This is merely uneasiness about what I would do if something happened to my quality content. Though no one was listening, she thought that to herself. Because it would be difficult to find such quality content again. While she was thinking, Hyukjin entered the forest of unknowns, and she followed, still amazed that he had discovered such a thing. The field changed. She saw an extremely dense forest, which suited the area's name perfectly. You have entered the forest of unknowns. Issuing a clear quest. Find the master of the forest of unknowns and converse with them. A clear quest was issued. Hyukjin had to find the master of the forest. Senya cast her senses far into the distance. It's large. It was a massive forest the likes of which could not exist in the beginner period. The size of this one forest was almost on par with the size of all of Seoul. I can hardly believe he was given a quest to find the master of such an enormous forest. Is this really a hidden piece that can be cleared? There was no knowing where he could be, or who the master of the forest was. This was really a quest with a lot of legwork. She heard his voice. If things go wrong, I could die of hunger, even though I'm almost level 30 now. Senya didn't respond. Hyukjin's words weren't wrong. It was possible he could starve. This place was so large, and he hadn't brought any provisions. Sponsored content. I anticipated a response to my meaningful words. This was a place that the Guardians would go crazy for, a so-called special hidden piece. There probably weren't many Guardians who wanted a super rookie like me to perish out of hunger in such a place. My level is 29. The Guardian selection time is coming up. So what will you do, Guardians? What kind of card will you offer me? In mere moments, the notices rushed in. The Herdsman of Las Vegas lends you a magic camping set. The Lady of the Scales lends you magic spring water. The True Master of the Heavenly Demonic Mountain lends you the Heavenly Demonic Breathing Art. The Courageous Lion King lends you a magic campfire. The Nameless Observer temporarily increases the grade of your eye of perception. Though I was the one who wanted this to happen, even I was struck speechless. What the hell is this? The number of Guardians who could send messages at the same time was limited to 5. Therefore, the previous stream of messages meant that all 5 slots were filled up to send me aid. Magic camping set, magic spring water, heavenly demonic breathing art, increase in eye of perception's grade, magic campfire? A magic camping set was basically some simple cooking tools and equipment for camping bundled as a set. Senya approached me. I will begin explaining the items. The magic camping set is. I knew everything even without her explanation. Magic camping set. Even though it looks shabby, it's a camping set that costs over $30,000. This set of items was something future rankers possessed at least one of and wasn't something that should appear in the beginner level period. With this, I could even establish a safe zone, though it would be weak. Also, the magic spring water is drinking water. Correct. In an extended dungeon exploration, this magic spring water was even more important than the magic camping set. You could get at least 1,000 liters of fresh drinking water from it. Moving on, the Heavenly Demonic Breathing Art is a special skill temporarily granted by the true master of the Heavenly Demonic Mountain that. It was a skill that the Sword Empress would get in the future. You could think of it like a cure-all that instantly restored your fatigue. Even though it counted as a crucial ability of the Sword Empress, I would be able to use it, at least temporarily. The magic campfire is. As one might expect, it was an enchanted campfire that could be turned on and off repeatedly. It was thought to be able to stay lit for at least 3,000 hours, could not be extinguished by rain, and also had a great effect in keeping monsters away. Player Kim Hyukjin, are you listening to me? Sponsored content. My eyes whipped to Senya. Was it my imagination, or did she raise her voice just now? Is she mad because I ignored her words? But the feelings I could pick up from her with eye of perception were a little strange. I don't think it's simple anger. I couldn't say what exactly she was feeling. For now, I increased the grade of eye of perception with the help of the Nameless Observer, temporarily increasing the grade of eye of perception. Afterwards, I was able to perceive Senya's emotions in greater detail. Things that I hadn't seen before were revealed to my eyes. Intermediate Administrator. Name, Senya. Age, 332. Level. Race, Angel. Subscriber Guardians. Courageous Lion King, Herdsman of Las Vegas, +1. State, neutral, observing, facade. Summary. Woman denying her feelings. Something's a little weird about her state in summary. Neutral and observing were fine, but what was with facade? And the summary was, woman denying her feelings. It's not even Angel denying her feelings, but woman? Was she bound by some kind of taboo where she had no choice but to deny her feelings? It would have been nice to be able to see more detailed information. What I found funny was that the Courageous Lion King and the Herdsman of Las Vegas were subscribed to Senia. They sure did it fast. There was also a +1 next to their names, but I didn't know who it was. An eye of perception. Strangely enough, I got the feeling that a little worry was mixed into Senia's emotions. However, that feeling disappeared before long. I must be mistaken. Sponsored content. An intermediate administrator would never worry about a mere player. Streamers and players had a you use me, I use you relationship. In other words, a business relationship. It was hard to imagine that she would worry about me when I was only a business partner. Senia reiterated, player Kim Hyukjin. I asked if you were listening to me or not. I heard it all, don't worry. Surprisingly, Senia's face reddened. Her wingtips trembled visibly. I do not lower myself to worry. Don't be mistaken, player Kim Hyukjin. That kind of reaction made me think she really did worry about me. But Senia continued, and I shelved that thought. With my authority as an intermediate administrator, I will issue a quest. In order to make the content more fun, an intermediate administrator could issue a quest that wouldn't alter the scenario. It wasn't that unusual an occurrence. But the quest was a little strange. No, it was very strange. Receiving the quest, repeat after me. Is this a real quest? Yes, there is no doubt. Repeat after me. It was self-explanatory. Repeat after me. A quest from the intermediate administrator Senia. Explain all the information Senia gave you in detail. Quest reward, 300 coins. Giving me this kind of joke quest, was she really worried about me? Was she purposefully trying to confirm that I knew everything, even at the cost of her precious coins? Well, it's easy enough. First of all, a magic camping set is. I already knew all there was to know about these items. And the magic campfire, on and off repeatedly. When I finished explaining all the items, I got a quest clear notice. The quest, repeat after me, has been cleared. From that, I noticed something odd. It was only one small oddity, but it didn't evade me. What the heck? Chapter 57. Herdsman of Las Vegas, 2. Sponsored content. I was able to earn 300 coins from this joke of a quest. But that wasn't the important thing. I didn't say anything about Eye of Perception. I hadn't said anything about Eye of Perception's grade increase, but the quest was cleared anyway. What does this mean? It meant that Senia didn't know about the gift the Nameless Observer gave me. But why? I had no idea. Is that really how it is? I was probably correct. Senia didn't know that my Eye of Perception's grade was temporarily increased. Satisfied? I memorized it perfectly, right? You did, but player Kim Hyukjin needs to listen more carefully to my explanation. It could be directly tied to your survival. Isn't it fine since I memorized it? Yes, but it wasn't good to talk to a streamer for too long. A chat between a player and streamer wasn't what the Guardians wanted to see. What they wanted to see was how I would clear this special hidden piece. Though, for someone like the Whispering Devil, I'm sure they'd like to see me suffer and suffer some more. In any case, I moved forward. I could tell from Eye of Perception that the scale of this forest was enormous, so large that it was difficult to determine exactly how far it extended. It'll take a while. Everything else wouldn't be much of a problem, but I was a little worried about my mom and older sister. But nothing will come out of worrying now. This was the path I chose to walk. There were no takebacks, and there was no path back anyway. The clue is to find the master of the forest. That was my only hint. It's evening right now. The flow of time existed in this hidden piece. The sun was setting, which meant that side was to the west. Without a dungeon compass, that's the only way for me to tell the direction. Sponsored content. According to the wisdom of the great explorer Jackson, when you didn't know where to go, it was most favorable to walk to the west. There wasn't any law behind it, but in his experience, west was best. It shouldn't be a high difficulty dungeon that changes directions on its own. I decided to begin my survey after setting a point of reference. A day passed in that manner. Using the camping tools the Guardians provided, I set up my campsite. The effect notifications of the magic campfire and magic camping set came in. A safe zone has been established. The safe zone will be marked in green. I was inwardly satisfied. This is on the big side, too. I was able to set up a safe zone 5 meters large in diameter, fairly large for a safe zone. When inside, I wouldn't be attacked by monsters. It's still the beginner period, after all. Among the monsters in the beginner period, there weren't any crazy ones that could destroy a safe zone parameter and barge inside. And if there is, safe zone or not, I would die anyway. I hoped there wasn't a monster like that, but if there was, it was game over for me. Otherwise, this safe zone was extremely useful. Player Kim Hyukjin, what have you discovered while investigating this place? I could tell, this wasn't her own question, she was just the mouthpiece. A guardian's question. The process of exploration itself wasn't that fun or exciting. Right now, I had to collect clues and clear the quest. I couldn't make the entire process interesting. Sometime along the way, there would be guardians who would stop watching me. I should explain the most essential things. I understood this system well, and I was determined to use that knowledge to the utmost. First of all, this is a forest field. That was all too obvious. Sponsored content. While surveying today, I saw about 3 different sets of claw marks. They were gouged on tree trunks. I was faithful to the basics that the great explorer Jackson wrote in his basic strategy guide. My focus was on figuring out what kind of monsters existed in the dungeon, what their habits were, what the terrain was, that kind of basic information. Looking at the height at which the claw marks were gouged and their size, there's a high chance that they belong to a cat-like beast monster. Senya listened to me in silence. With the upgraded eye of perception, I could read Senya's emotions a little. Even though she didn't express it on her face, she was currently impressed. The Guardians were probably in the same boat, because by their standards, I was a beginner who hadn't even had his advancement yet. There's a high chance the beasts have individual territories. Considering that I didn't see any traces of fighting, they avoid fighting amongst each other. That means there's no fighting between them at all. What use is that to player Kim Hyukjin? If I move along the borders of their territories, where one monster's territory meets another, I can minimize the chance of getting attacked by them. Also, nocturnal birds of prey are flying around at night. They moved at night. They weren't so strong they could punch through my safe zone, but they were still pretty dangerous monsters. Like the red-eyed owl. The red-eyed owl was only level 29, but it was a bird-type monster. It also had better eyesight at night than me, so it would be much more difficult to face than regular level 29 monsters. Which has to mean there are creatures out there for those monsters to hunt. If there was a predator, there was prey. That was normally the case. Dungeons were places ruled by the law of the jungle. Strangely enough, I don't see traces of prey. So what does that mean? I didn't know, either. But something was definitely strange. Senya didn't respond. The true master of the heavenly demonic mountain feels great interest in your exploration. The whispering devil finds your playing fun. The courageous lion king is bored. The lady of the scales expresses her admiration at your composure. Sponsored content. The nameless observer observes you without pause. Another day passed. I wasn't able to discover anything more. Let's not be impatient. It was only the 3rd day. Dangerous dungeons often took several months to clear. I'm strangely calm. Actually, if you were in an unfamiliar, potentially dangerous place for 3 days all alone, it was probably normal to be scared. And yet, weirdly enough, I'm not. I had no choice but to honestly acknowledge my feelings. No. It wasn't just that I wasn't scared. To be perfectly honest, I'm having fun. Right now, I was having a great deal of fun playing. Feeling that playing was fun was certainly influenced by one's talent. That was how many people had put it. I just have to hope I'm not an early bloomer. Whether I was an early blooming player or not would be determined by whether I could break through level 40. Normally, early bloomers stalled at around level 30 to 40. On my 4th day of exploration, I stumbled upon a burnt-down village. Entering the raised village of forest dwellers. Entering a safe zone. In this raised village of forest dwellers within the special hidden field, the forest of unknowns, there were only scorched frames left of most of the houses. It was a designated safe zone. Will there be a clue here? I didn't know. I would only know by digging around. If there was something I could click, then I would be able to obtain a clue. This house is pretty intact. Sponsored content. One of the houses was still standing. Even though it was a roughly made wooden house, it still looked like a house. I went inside. Huh? I instantly turned, taking out a sword from my inventory. What was that just now? It was undoubtedly a safe zone, but I felt something strange. It was very minute, but there was definitely something there. Eye of perception is telling me. I could feel a gaze on me. Something's out there. But I couldn't figure out what that thing was. Something was watching me. I was barely able to capture its presence with my upgraded eye of perception. If I hadn't gotten the upgrade, I wouldn't have been able to feel it at all. Even though this is a safe zone. It seemed I had to keep my guard up. I had a bad feeling, somehow. That's clickable. I saw a scorched set of drawers that was clickable. When I clicked it with my gaze, the drawer automatically opened, revealing a letter within. Letter of the Forest Dwellers Chief, acquired. I examined the letter. Dear Old Man Lepre. This is a letter sent from the westernmost village to the easternmost village Dante. Old Man Lepre, it's already over for us. The master of the forest is enraged. They have unleashed their fury on us. There is no way for us to avoid their wrath. I hope that you... I couldn't read the rest because the letter was partly burnt. So the setting is that the master of the forest is enraged, and because of that, this place was burnt down? That was definitely a plausible setting. I had to use this letter as a launchpad to find more clues and meet that master of the forest. The letter says this is the westernmost village, which meant that if I moved eastward, I would find a village to the far east. Sponsored content. What do you intend on doing? Will you go eastward? No. The letter said this was the westernmost village. There was a high chance that I was almost at the western end of this forest of unknowns. It could be helpful to know what was at the end of this field. I'll explore the west side a little more before moving east. That could very well be the more efficient strategy. Understood. I wasn't able to get any additional information from the raised village of forest dwellers. I headed west some more. At some point, I was blocked by a transparent wall. You cannot go any further. The field, a dense forest, continued before my eyes. But I couldn't go past this wall. There's a chance this is the end of the field. Or, it could also be set to become traversable only after satisfying a special condition. I thought that the latter was more likely, because I could physically see more of the field. Not much came of that. Now that I had checked, I had to turn to the east. A dungeon clear carried out without knowing the strategy was a little boring. Like I first expected, the beast monsters had some sort of agreement and didn't leave their territories, and as a result, I was able to explore without getting attacked. There might be something if I go to the east. It might be a little boring, but it couldn't be helped. For the Guardians, this might just be a game or amusement, but for me, this was the matter of life and death. Even when challenging the unknown, it was best to do it as safely as possible. That faint gaze I felt in the village. Very occasionally, I felt that gaze again. Something I couldn't identify in the least was watching me. It didn't look like they were going to attack me right away, but it weighed heavily on me and was part of why I couldn't be careless here. But just then, I heard a new notice. The herdsman of Las Vegas offers you a proposal. This notice ushered the scenario into a new phase. Sponsored content. Chapter 58. Elf in the Well. Sponsored content. The herdsman of Las Vegas offers you a proposal. I knew about the herdsman of Las Vegas. Other than being the guardian of Michelle, the Gold Pyramid, the herdsman of Las Vegas was a guardian who greatly enjoyed gambling. I heard he made a lot of cracked wagers. Attractive proposals that a player would be hard-pressed to resist. But the only one who survived that wager and succeeded was Michelle. That was why his only successful contractee was Michelle. It will definitely be an appealing, hard-to-resist proposal. That proposal unfolded. If you clear the special hidden piece, the unknown forest, within 3 days, he will grant you 100,000 coins. Such a massive quantity of coins would make even a dead man perk up. Guardian sponsorships were limited to 100, 200, or maybe 300 coins, at most. But now, he was offering a whopping 100,000 coins. In the player world, it was pretty much like a lottery jackpot. Accept the quest, clear within 3 days? Upon closer inspection, it was actually a little fraudulent. He only waived the sweet reward I would get upon succeeding and didn't tell me what the penalty would be if I failed. You'd be setting yourself up for bankruptcy if you were blinded by that 100,000 coin sum. Senia, what happens if I fail this quest? I will share the quest information at the player's request. For some reason, I had the feeling that Senia was a little relieved. If you cannot clear within 3 days. Senia's wingtips trembled, something that seemed to happen an awful lot these days. What's making her act like that? I wondered what was making her so shocked. Then when it becomes time to choose a guardian, you must unconditionally choose the herdsman of Las Vegas as your contracted guardian. For a moment, I was also rendered speechless. Sponsored content. That's the penalty, just that? A staggering 100,000 coins was on the line. The penalty is only that? It was an enormous reward that could never have existed in the beginner period, and even if it did, it probably shouldn't. But the penalty was merely, choose me. Actually, someone on the level of the herdsman of Las Vegas wouldn't be a bad choice. He was the guardian of that famous gold pyramid, Michelle, wasn't he? A guardian like the herdsman of Las Vegas would cement a foundation that would potentially allow me to grow into the world's top ranker. The scale of the current gamble was proof of that. He was a dependable guardian who was willing to throw himself into developing a player once he made up his mind to do so. 3 days. Player Kim Hyukjin, will you accept the quest? Asked Senya. I contemplated for a moment. The herdsman of Las Vegas. He was a guardian who didn't skimp on supporting the player he treasured. I thought about it a little more, but even after thinking about it some more, my answer was the same. No, I cannot accept this quest. The herdsman of Las Vegas is curious about what you are thinking. The herdsman of Las Vegas didn't express disappointment, only his curiosity. He was definitely no petty bastard. As expressionless as ever, Senya said, may I ask why? Because the herdsman of Las Vegas was a guardian who loved gambling to an excessive degree. Michelle was lucky enough to succeed such a gamble, but I wasn't the type to enjoy gambling. More than anything, I had no need to gamble. With my knowledge of the future, I was able to invest in the unlikely. But when it came to things that weren't just unlikely, but almost impossible, there was no need to gamble on that low chance of things working out. It's more than enough to just invest. With that in mind, taking on a high-risk, high-return gamble wasn't very wise. Sponsored content. So the question was, how should I put it? I had to express my thoughts in a way that least offended a so-called named guardian like the herdsman of Las Vegas. At the same time, I had to be able to win over other guardians who were currently watching this all unfold very intently. Placing a bet is something one does when you have a chance of victory. Was the proposal made by the herdsman of Las Vegas one that was impossible to complete? No, that's not the case. Clearing within 3 days? It was possible. But I can't orchestrate the probability, at least not in the current field. I still lack too much information. I want to be the one who orchestrates the probability and makes a situation where I can win. Only idiots would let themselves be blinded by the tantalizing reward and bet without any information. It was the kind of disposition the herdsman of Las Vegas liked. Michelle had also said something like this. Gambling was a fight of probability, but she, the player, would create that probability so that she would have a slightly higher chance to succeed. She said people who bet without preparation were idiots. That's why I refused. A gamble entrusted to luck alone is no different from throwing the game. I didn't know if that answer would satisfy the herdsman. Notices came in. The herdsman of Las Vegas is satisfied by your response. The herdsman of Las Vegas respects your thinking. Other notices came in as well. A great number of anonymous guardians are impressed by your response. Even though they saw the same situation and heard the same things, the reactions of the guardians were mixed. A great number of anonymous guardians ridicule you. I could understand why they would ridicule me. I was still only level 29. To them, I was like a flickering candlelight they could extinguish with a single puff of their lips. Someone so weak refused the proposal of the herdsman of Las Vegas of all guardians, saying they would bet while orchestrating the probability. They were big words spoken with a great deal of bravado. Laugh all you want. The day when the guardians could no longer ridicule me would come. I would see to that. Sponsored content. I moved east, starting from the westernmost village, which the letter had called, I went to, Dante, in the east. While doing so, I had to prepare food. Splurt. I jumped on the back of a wild boar as big as me and thrust my dagger. Squeal. The boar's name was Fang Boar. It was about level 25, but it had a pretty volatile temperament. Fang Boar has been killed. Express acquired. 17 coins acquired. It gave way less coins than other monsters of the same level, but it had its own virtues that made it worth killing. Fruit bundle, acquired. I had to admit it was a little strange. I had never heard of Fang Boars dropping fruit bundles. Normally, they didn't. Maybe it's a hidden piece put in to allow a player to survive? I brushed it aside for now, but it was a bit strange. In any case, I hunted a few more Fang Boars. Fruit bundle, acquired. In the process, I was able to procure a little more information. They're not wary of their surroundings. Normally, Fang Boars were monsters that were watchful of their surroundings, especially if there were beast monsters in the vicinity. From the traces left on the trees, there are definitely beast monsters around here. Sponsored content. But despite that, these boars weren't wary. That meant the beast monsters were weak, or that they didn't attack Fang Boars. Those traces are definitely from a red tiger. There are red tigers around, but they don't attack the fanged boars? That was indeed very peculiar. The weird gaze I could feel with eye of perception also bothered me. It could even be that the master of the forest was watching me right now. There was no doubt about it. As I was walking along the forest floor, I discovered a trap made of rope, a snare designed to catch animals using a rope and net. It was enchanted with very basic, capture magic. What? In this field, in which a very small village of forest dwellers existed, there was an artifact? And an enchanted artifact, no less? They used an artifact to hunt animals? As basic as the magic was, enchanted items were expensive. It was absolutely not an item a tiny village in a forest would use. Something's going on. As I thought, there was more to this place than the eye suggested. I couldn't say what exactly it was, but it was definitely strange. There was a high chance I was missing something right now. I stowed the snare in my inventory. Then, I continued to move east, and eventually, I found the easternmost village, Dante. The same notices I had heard in the westernmost village came in. Entering the raised village 2 of forest dwellers. Entering a safe zone. I combed through the village. Like the other village, there was a fairly intact shack with a clickable set of drawers inside. When I opened it, I found a piece of paper with words on it, just like before. Dear Old Man Dudia. This is a letter sent from the easternmost village Dante to the westernmost village. Old Man Dudia. We need a sacrifice. The master of the forest demanded an offering from us. But you know as well as me the restriction of this forest. So I am very troubled. Oh, right, the offering for the master of the forest is the restriction of the forest? I had no idea what that could be. Sponsored content. An offering for the master of the forest. What I could be sure of was that this place had some kind of restriction, had a master of the forest, and the villagers needed an offering for the master of the forest. If you can't make an offering to the master of the forest, it might be that I would also be annihilated, like these villagers. Then where in the world was I supposed to find the master of the forest? I left the shack and walked around the village. In this village reduced to ruins, there were only burned down shacks. And a well in the center of the village. Huh? Eye of perception told me that something was in the well. I approached it. The inside was dark, and I couldn't see anything. Someone's inside. They were barely breathing, their presence so faint that they could die at any moment. It's probably not a player. Which meant it was an NPC. An NPC that might give me a huge hint to clearing this place. I have to take them out. According to what I felt through eye of perception, the person inside the well was one hair away from death. There was no time to waste. I can do it. My careful exploration on the way here was a big help. I thought this rope trap enchanted with capture magic was strange. For such an out-of-place object to exist here meant that it would be helpful in clearing the dungeon. It was good I'd surveyed my surroundings thoroughly, even though that was a little more time-consuming. Use the snare. I tossed the enchanted snare into the well. Capture was successful. I hauled up the snare. Eye of perception told me it was unmistakably a person. Before long, I saw her. A woman with extremely long hair and clothing that had become rags. She was markedly emaciated, like she hadn't eaten in a long time. For now, I poured a constitution potion and cure potion into her mouth. Chapter 59. Elf in the Well, 2. Sponsored content. The woman who absorbed the potion recovered her vitality remarkably quickly. Her emaciated body of just skin and bones suddenly grew flesh at a speed at which, growing, really was the right word to describe it. Her crumbly, dull hair completely fell out, replaced in moments by glossy, green-colored hair. As she regained consciousness, a breeze carrying a refreshing arboreal scent blew over. She's an elf? In conclusion, the woman I saved was an elf. The elves. They were a race with exceptional curing and recovery abilities, one that loved nature and had very beautiful appearances. Among their kind, oak elves were famous for adhering to unconditional, non-violence. Later, there'll be people who abuse that trait of theirs. For example, people like that notorious slave trader, Seo Jun. In any case, I had just saved an elf. I had seen them often on YouTube, as their beauty was renowned and there were a lot of streamers who exclusively filmed elves. Seeing one in person. The phrase, jaw-dropping beauty, seemed a little exaggerated to me. Is it because Senia is next to me? I couldn't see her right now, but maybe I wasn't that blown away by the elf's beauty because I was already used to Senia's appearance. It kind of just felt like my mind recognized the elf as an incredible beauty, but that was it. Just, she's super pretty. Thanks to Eye of Perception's temporary upgrade, I was able to read the elf's status. NPC. Name, Lindia. Age, 91. Level. Race, Oak Elf. State, confused, hungry, scared. Summary. Confused pacifist. Level cannot be determined. Because Eye of Perception's proficiency is not high enough, viewing more detailed information is impossible. Thank you for saving me. That was how our conversation began. As per usual, conversations with NPCs who gave quests or clues began with greetings. Afterwards, you'd get into the nitty-gritty, like asking them why they were here or if they knew something that could be of help. It was pretty much an official format, so I was able to speak to her without much difficulty. You seem to be a resident of this village, and it seems that you have suffered the wrath of the Master of the Forest. She nodded. She said that she fled the Master of the Forest by jumping into the well and was barely able to survive. We talked for a while, and in the end, the answer was this. You make an offering to the Master of the Forest. An offering? Sponsored content. Yes. It had to be the same offering that showed up in the letter. What needs to be offered? Well, Lindia looked embarrassed. You don't know what the offering is, I see. Yes, I really cannot figure out what it could be. If I knew, I would have offered it at the altar to the south. I at least found out that there was an altar to the south. I will soon return to nature's embrace. In our words, so human words, she was saying she would die. From what Lindia was saying, she hadn't completely recovered, but had regained her strength for a brief moment. Is that so? Yes, I will return to the embrace of the Great Mother who gave birth to me. Do not be alarmed, I will turn to dust and become nutrients for the oaks. The sight of the elf clasping her hands at her chest was the very picture of a goddess who loved the forest. I see. However, there was more to this woman than her goddess-like exterior suggested. The forest scent tickling my nose wasn't as fresh-smelling as before. But you know, I started to say. I became certain of it after talking to the elf. Can you really return to the oaks? I said one more thing. You fake. From the very first moment I entered this forest, the forest of unknowns, there was something off about it. There are traces of predators, yet no traces of prey being caught. The boars also acted like they had never been hunted before. And they don't fight for territory like beast monsters usually do. Also, I could hear nocturnal birds of prey at night, but there weren't actually any monsters that they could catch. Something was weird about this ecosystem. And, fanged boars don't drop fruit bundles out of nowhere. That wasn't all. There's even an enchanted artifact in a place like this. The system tended to put quite a lot of importance on fundamental settings and realistic situations. Of course, there were also scenarios that were random and came out of left field, but those wouldn't appear in the beginner period. Sponsored content. And there's an elf here? It was true that an elf's ability to recover was unrivaled, but even an elf couldn't recover so quickly from just a beginner recovery potion. Well, let's just let 100 inconsistencies slide and say there's really an elf here. However, why did you say you were a resident of this village? Elves didn't harm trees. They lived for the trees and would never even dream of putting a saw to a tree. So if elves were to live in this village, there shouldn't be any huts. But this village had huts. That was why I purposefully asked her if she was a resident of this village. Can an elf build and live in a hut? From the first point to the last, it was all strange. If you looked at it closely, there were many inconsistencies, ones that strayed far, far away from a realistic situation. I stared at the elf, who was turning to dust and disappearing. Lindia the elf looked at me with an expression of utter confusion. I have no idea what you are talking about. Then, she pleaded, make an offering to the Master of the Forest. The altar is to the far south. From her expression and attitude, she looked sincere. She probably is sincere. She was probably set to be that way. Lindia was an NPC created to relay this information. In other words, she wasn't a real oak elf, but a fake created in a form that was suitably appropriate for this special hidden field, the Forest of Unknowns. What I read with Eye of Perception was probably just Lindia's set values. Lindia, who believed she was an elf, turned to dust and disappeared. I chuckled. It's true that oak elves turn to dust and disappear. But the execution was a little sloppy. A green-colored wind is supposed to blow at the same time. I turned around and tried looking around me, but I didn't find anything. Eye of Perception didn't pick up anything, either. It's strange. I'd been in a forest the entire time. Why was there a burst of forest scent just because an elf regained consciousness? Elves didn't generate bursts of forest scent. It was just that their bodies carried the strong scent of the forest in which they lived. Focusing on the details, something was definitely off. Doesn't it feel way too deliberate? I assembled all the pieces of the puzzle. The field I was standing in right now, this forest of unknowns, was a fake. It was a fake world sloppily created by someone's hand. A fake created with little attention to detail by someone who had only experienced the world through books. That feeling of someone staring at me all this time. That, too, could be explained. If this was an artificially created fake field, there had to be someone managing it, and that someone had to be the person staring at me. It bothers me. You have recognized the magic effect of the forest of unknowns. Eye of perception has begun to resist the magic effect. Sponsored content. I was suddenly struck with the feeling that all the strength was leaving my body. If they can make a fake of such enormous scale, then such a feat would require a huge amount of magic power. That meant that whoever it was that made this fake world, they weren't an easy opponent. I hastily used the recovery potion I'd bound to a slot. It felt like every drop of energy in my body was being sucked away. My head began to throb with a terrible headache. Eye of perception has begun to determine the truth. Eye of perception has begun to gaze at a distortion. Goo! Blood surged from my mouth. It felt like I lacked the strength to break this special space. No. I could do it. There were many things I wanted to do. I was going to live proudly, with my head held up high. I wouldn't fall down here to something of this level. Eye of perception reacts to the player's strong will. It felt like my eyes would burst, like every blood vessel was popping. I could tell. If I'm unable to break this fake right now, I will die. There was another possibility. Or I'll have to live like this fake elf, believing the fake is real in this fake world. I might even become an NPC who would give a fake quest to the next player who stumbled upon this place. I couldn't let that happen. I had to live in the real world, not a fake one. Break it. I clenched my teeth. Even this fake has to have its limit. The person who created this place probably didn't want to expose their limits. That was why they put easternmost and westernmost on the letters. It was to discourage anyone from going any further, where they would see the end of the field. They're definitely listening to my words. Making them falter, no matter how little, was good for me. My eyes felt like they were exploding. My head felt like it would crack open and my whole body felt like it was crumbling apart. But I endured the intense pain and smiled, looking as relaxed as possible. This fake of yours that has such an obvious limit, I will break it for you right now. Eye of perception has begun to crush the magic effect. The condition to destroy the forest of unknowns has been satisfied. The forest of unknowns has begun to be destroyed. Sponsored content. I lost consciousness. After who knows how long, I opened my eyes. I'm alive. It looked like I was still in the forest of unknowns. However, I could feel it with certainty. The range has become much, much smaller. Originally, this forest was so enormous and wide that Eye of perception couldn't even tell me how large it was. But now, it was as small as the village of forest dwellers. It felt like a garden cultivated to look like a very small forest. Eye of perception picked up something's presence. It wasn't a person. There's something there. However, I didn't pay attention to whatever it was right away. There was something more important I had to do. I destroyed the fake. Honestly, it had been pretty dicey for me, but in any case, I destroyed it. But you know. You're listening, right, Master of the Forest? No matter how you think about it, you shouldn't be able to make such a huge field with your true ability alone. If they were capable of that, they would have made the field with greater attention to detail. This was merely a shoddy imitation. Which means, it wouldn't take long to explore this small space. You must have gotten help from something. For example, like an artifact that can dramatically increase your magic power. Items like that were sold at extremely high prices. Actually, they were so rare they weren't even sold on the market. When they did occasionally pop up, they were artifacts that could only be used 1 or 2 times at most. I wonder where such an artifact might be. It was said that misfortune often turns into a blessing. After figuring out everything about this field, I could see what it was that I had to get here. I also knew it was an extremely valuable treasure, one that truly befitted a special hidden field found in a hidden field. But I can see it very clearly, you know? I moved forward. As I did so, it appeared. Chapter 60. The Final Puzzle. There was a website where countless people, starting with the great explorer Jackson, shared information they possessed. It was called Playpedia, and it was an open collaboration encyclopedia site like Wikipedia. The habits and unique traits of each monster were naturally important subject matter for civil service students to study, and that was also a field I had a personal interest in. The thin hobgoblin is a spirit monster that is capable of growth. This growth-type monster that has only been found a few times across all the servers experiences a total of 3 stages of evolution. 3 stages of evolution: thin hobgoblin, chubby hobgoblin, and finally, fat hobgoblin. This monster with 3 evolution stages was considered fairly important. It appeared a total of 4 times, and only in Italy. The fat hobgoblin appeared for the first time in Italy, where 400 people were eaten by it. The fat hobgoblin's second name was man-eating hobgoblin. At the first and second stages, it is simply a slightly dangerous monster that enjoys playing pranks. It is skilled at apparition or illusion magic. In addition, it excels at creating spatial distortions and likes to harass players. The monster that appeared before my eyes was a thin hobgoblin. Once its true form is discovered, the thin hobgoblin is not all that difficult to defeat. And that was because, when it panics, its intelligence drops to that of a young child's. They were skilled in apparition or illusion magic and had an uncanny ability to create spatial distortions. When I first realized that this place was a fake, the first monster that came to mind was this thin hobgoblin. Even for a special hidden piece, a fat hobgoblin wouldn't show up. Special hidden piece or not, this dungeon was still generated from the beginner grade Soul Station dungeon. If a fat hobgoblin showed up here, I would have to find some way to escape, strategies or whatever be damned, because that would be the only way I could survive. No, I would die without even being able to escape. Such a monster was impossible to oppose with my current abilities. However, the monster that appeared before my eyes was a thin hobgoblin, a humanoid monster with blue skin. It was generally thin, but had a protruding belly like E.T. That tiny horn on its head is the weak point. It had a head of dry and brittle, brown hair. Underneath was one big eye. It didn't have a nose or ears, but had a mouth even bigger than its single eye. The average level is around 31. Thin hobgoblin LVL? Even considering that this was a hidden field, its level shouldn't exceed 35. My current level was 29, and I had far better stats than other players. It wouldn't be hard to fight a single thin hobgoblin. I just had to watch out for one attack. Sponsored content. The thin hobgoblin that had revealed itself yelled, "Don't lie." I grinned. What are you saying I lied about? There's no way a mere human can figure out where my treasure is. The treasure the hobgoblin was referring to was a mana crystal. The one this thin hobgoblin was using was specifically an amplification mana crystal. Is that really so? I took one step closer to the thin hobgoblin. As expected for a monster that could talk, I was able to read its state with eye of perception. State: panicked, doubtful, denial. When thin hobgoblins panicked, they would become as smart as a young kid. This one was still immature and far from becoming a fat hobgoblin. If I couldn't face an opponent this easy, I would be putting the regressor name to shame. But it's very clear to my eyes. I pointed in the direction of the thin hobgoblin. And no, it can't be. The hobgoblin stumbled 3 steps backwards. I took 1 step forward, but the hobgoblin didn't move. It screamed frantically at me. "You lying conman, if you come any closer, I'll cut out your tongue." Thanks to its actions, I figured it out. So that's where the mana crystal is. For a thin hobgoblin to make a field of such scale, one as big as the Forest of Unknowns, it would require a very high-quality mana crystal. Finding the location where it was hidden was, of course, impossible with my abilities alone. Even though my eye of perception was upgraded, it couldn't detect the exact location. Thin hobgoblins tend to have an obsession over things they consider their treasures. Sometimes, that can be a worthless piece of shit, and sometimes, it can be a truly valuable gem. The player must judge which of the two the treasure is based on the situation. And I had made my judgment. There, right under the hobgoblin's feet, was an amplification mana crystal. Of course I don't know. I knew it. At that moment, I used the naive hobgoblin's relief as an opening to use Flash Step. There was no way a hobgoblin that wasn't even a chubby hobgoblin would be able to read Flash Step's movements. I can see it. I saw its little horn. That was the monster's weak point. I couldn't be slow to attack. If it detected danger, the hobgoblin would hide its horn under its skin, making it harder to defeat. Huh? Sponsored content. I saw the thin hobgoblin's body instantly stiffen. Its muscles went rigid, freezing the hobgoblin in place for the slightest moment. As fleeting as the moment was, it was more than enough time for me. Holding the dagger well suited for quick attacks, I made a powerful vertical stab. Using the special skill Excellent Strike. An additional 20% damage, plus critical hit. This time, I was lucky and landed a critical hit. The thin hobgoblin and I weren't that far apart in level. If you took my stats into consideration, you could even say I was stronger than the thin hobgoblin. On top of that, I hit a weak point. And it was even a critical hit. A wah! With a short cry, the thin hobgoblin fell onto its butt and jumped back onto its feet. Why you fucking dickhead, squealed the thin hobgoblin. I just had to get past this crisis. The thin hobgoblin was probably channeling the mana crystal right now. It would be difficult for me to handle a blast from an amplification mana crystal capable of creating a field of this size. I have to believe in it. The Great Orc Warrior set. I had 3 Great Orc Warrior items on me. Great Orc Warrior's iron armor. Great Orc Warrior's leather shoes. Great Orc Warrior's leather pants. Of course, I had them all equipped, which triggered a partial set effect. Partial set effect. Defends against a physical attack the wearer cannot handle, limited to once per day. However, the wearer's level must not exceed level 30. If their level exceeds 30, a damage reduction effect will be triggered depending on the attack's power. A huge club was formed above my head. It's huge. It looked to be at least 5 meters large. This huge club was the lethal move the thin hobgoblin could use only one time. Vroom, vroom, Hobgoblin Club. The shadow of the Hobgoblin Club covered my head. Sponsored content. I can't dodge anyway. It was a special attack I couldn't dodge with my current physical abilities. Even if I tried, I would still get hit. I had no choice but to defend. While getting hit, I'll also attack. I would believe in the power of the Great Orc Warrior set while unleashing a blow of my own. Something like cutting off an arm to save the body. It's coming down. I clenched my teeth. It was possible there would be some momentary pain. Thud. From my head to my toes, I felt a massive impact. Registering unmanageable damage. Damage is negated once per day. There was an impact, but I didn't take any damage from it. I just recognized mentally that I was attacked. If you use a technique this big, you'll leave an opening. I wouldn't miss it. I switched from my dagger to the sword. For this humanoid monster, even though their horn was their biggest weak point, the throat and heart were also significant weak points. The heart. It wasn't hard to hunt a hobgoblin that had lost its cool. Thin hobgoblin has been killed. Express acquired. 42 coins acquired. Since I killed a hobgoblin, I was hoping that something like a spirit art club, a pretty pricey item, would drop. Darn, it didn't drop. Unfortunately, it didn't drop. The notices continued. The Forest of Unknowns distortion has been recognized. The hobgoblin controlling the Forest of Unknowns distortion has been eliminated. Sponsored content. The clear condition of the Forest of Unknowns has been satisfied. I satisfied the clear conditions of the special hidden piece generated within the Soul Station Dungeon's hidden piece. I can't be sent outside. Since I cleared the Forest of Unknowns, I would be kicked out of this place after the rewards were distributed. I have to find the mana crystal. I pushed aside the hobgoblin's body and set to digging. The item shop had most things, but strangely enough, it didn't sell a shovel. In the end, I had to dig with my hands. Distributing the clear rewards for the Forest of Unknowns. Once the rewards were fully distributed, I would be sent out. Before that happens, quick. An amplification mana crystal that could create a field of this scale would be worth at least $10 million in just 3 years. I had to find it. My hands didn't stop moving. It would have been really nice if I had a digging skill or something like that. 500 coins acquired. 1 level up point acquired. 1 new trait for Eye of Perception has been added. Hobgoblin perfume acquired. I was so busy looking for the mana crystal that would become $10 million in 3 years that my ears didn't even register the notices. Where is it? Even after digging what appeared to be 20 centimeters into the ground with my bare hands, I couldn't see it. It shouldn't be buried any deeper than this. If the mana crystal was buried too deep, its power would be greatly weakened. No matter how outstanding the amplification mana crystal was, the hobgoblin wouldn't have buried it this deep. I messed up somewhere. Digging any further was a wasted effort. The tips of my fingers were bleeding, but I didn't give a damn. I straightened, looking around. What am I missing? And then, I realized something. It definitely said the clear conditions were satisfied, yet I'm still in the dungeon. Sponsored content. There wasn't even a remaining time indicator. That meant there had to be something else here. An exitless dungeon? A dungeon without an exit, one you couldn't leave even after satisfying the clear conditions. There was no way such a ridiculously difficult dungeon would have appeared already. I had to believe that. Exitless dungeons could only be forcibly pried open by magic class rankers 7 years later. If this place really was an exitless dungeon, I would either die of starvation, loneliness, or wait for 7 years. In any case, it would definitely be a shit situation. What am I missing? There had to be something. Huh? Some distance in front of me, I saw something on the ground. What's that? Something very small with 4 limbs was standing on the ground like a person and staring at me. A squirrel? It was a squirrel, but the expression on its face was almost human-like. The squirrel was looking at me with what I could swear was a pompous expression, laughing at me like a human. Was there ever a squirrel like that? It didn't appear to be a monster, at least, and it was obviously not an NPC. Even for a person who had knowledge of the future, this squirrel was an unfamiliar existence. Seeing as Senia hasn't appeared, it's not a bug. The squirrel stood on 2 legs and held out an arm, to me, wearing an expression of, I get it, so hand it over. Is it asking me to give it something? The squirrel spread out its other palm. When it did so, a huge mana crystal the size of a watermelon appeared over its tiny palm. The squirrel's using magic? It had an inventory, or was using summoning magic. Or maybe it had something like its own innate squirrel ability. It was definitely no ordinary squirrel. It finally struck me. That is, the final puzzle of this place. And I had the feeling I could solve that puzzle.